In this interview, we talk to the author of Choosing the Thriving Life Paradigm, Mary Gathergood. We discuss her life as written about in her latest book, Living in a Society Embodying the Power Over Paradigm of Control and General Disregard of the Natural World as a highly sensitive person, more aligned to the Thriving Life Paradigm. She shares the inspiration for the title of her book from elder and wise woman of the Dine, McCabe, and we explore her work with Deep Adaptation, which is working to support communities through the current climatic and societal changes in alignment with Mother Earth. She shares her communication with the sea, the planet, and her connection to her spirit guides. Mary is a retired mental health therapist and holistic life coach, and has more recently become involved in the Earth Listening projects, supporting folks who are becoming climate and societal collapse aware through working with Deep Adaptation, such as the Malvern Green Space Project. Enjoy this interview, and please remember to like and subscribe to our channel to support what we do and keep updated. Hi, Mary. Thank you for joining us on MDTV. Now, we met at a local event, didn't we?
Yes.
It's Malvern Green Space
Yes.
Visioning.
Yes.
Yeah, and we had quite a lengthy chat with you because we realised we had quite a lot in common. And there's a spiritual kind of element there, very evident in what you do. So, on that night, you gave us this book, didn't you? Choosing the Thriving Life Paradigm.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the book. What led you to actually write this book? What was your inspiration?
Well, I started it about 8 years ago because it's actually my life story.
Wow.
Which is, you've read it, so you know, quite long, crazy. But when I'd written it 8 years ago, I wrote it from a mindset I wasn't happy with. And I'd sent it to an American friend of mine who said, it's a good story, it's interesting, but it doesn't reflect who you are now. And I realised I'd written it from a previous mindset of being upset and cross and quite reactive. And I wanted to rewrite it. I'd been trying to rewrite it for a while. And then I was on a course, I'm not sure whether it was a Findhorn course or some course or other, and I'd met this Indigenous lady called McCabe. And every time this lady spoke, I was in floods of tears. I remember I was on a big Zoom call and I had to put my video off because I was a mess. And what I realised was, everything she said, it was like I was going, oh yes, this is how life should be. This is me. This is me. No wonder I don't fit in with this life. So I then studied with this lady for a while and got her permission to use her term, which is thriving life, and realised that this was the paradigm I'd been attempting to live under all these years, whilst living in a world that lived under the power over life paradigm, which everybody else lived in. So it was hardly surprising I hadn't fitted in or had a very sensible life in terms of other people.
Yeah. So it was really that catalysed you into then finishing your book, and it kind of helped you put the pieces together.
It did.
It gave a kind of a not a label, I suppose. It is a label, but it's a banner or a paradigm that you could then fit it all together with.
Yes, and each chapter I realised that it was easy to understand where I had was coming from when I spoke about thriving life views of the world. And it was also easy to see how the people in my life, like my parents and my ex-husband, were coming from the other paradigm. And it was somehow it all came into shape And I wrote it ever so quickly in the end. I wrote it in about 2 months.
Wow.
But I'd already written the historical facts of actually where I'd been and what I'd done.
Yeah.
And I found that I could quite easily let go of some of the my feelings of annoyance at how it had been and this sort of thing. And I began to see from a spiritual perspective, it was perfect. Everything was perfect. I'd come in, I was born just after the war, born in 46, just after the war, and I'd been working all my life with the concept of fear and processing fear and what fear was doing, why there was so much fear, how we could live in a way where there wasn't so much fear. Because as a therapist, I used to work in mental health and working a lot with anxiety and depression. So kind of it all fitted in and it all made sense. I wasn't cross anymore.
Wow.
Which was amazing.
So really the book was quite transformative for you as well.
Yes, very much so. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
So tell people about the 2 paradigms you just mentioned there, so people haven't read your book.
Okay. Actually, I could read the little bump off the back. Would that be an idea?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, that'd be good. So
Because there's a couple
hear
of...
the author reading.
That's right. And this is just what's on the back of the book. So it starts off saying this is the story of one woman's attempt to be the change she wanted to see in the world, which was on the first line of my website, I think. This is both an exciting adventure story plus a deeply philosophical work examining 2 very different ways of seeing the world. The first is the existing power over paradigm, which promotes a lifestyle that has resulted in rape and pillage, often living with total disregard for what we are leaving for future generations, or indeed for anyone other than ourselves. What other paradigm or species has ever developed a way of life that destroyed its own habitat at the same time as abusing and wreaking havoc on all other species and life forms? However, living by the thriving life paradigm means living in such a way that all life can thrive, not only other human beings, but animals, the birds, the fish, the insects, but also the trees, the rivers, the rocks, the minerals in the earth, the mountains. When we listen to the indigenous cultures of the world, who, unlike us, have lived sustainably for over 10,000 years, we experience a paradigm shift as we discover Mother Earth really is alive and sacred, which is what I've always felt.
Yes. Wow. I can imagine that mindset that you've always had within you was quite at odds. I mean, now there's more awareness of sustainability and, ecological living. But back in the 50s and 60s, my God, it must have been so different.
Well, I was lucky, I see now. I grew up in the countryside. My father was a head gardener on a country estate in Lincolnshire. They still had, in those days, almost sort of feudal setups where the lord of the manor, held the estate and different people worked in them. And so the house went with the job, which was very nice, but of course meant there was never... I never inherited anything, and so financially it put me at odds with most other people I knew. But the whole sense of growing up with a father who probably recognised it, wouldn't have had that wording, but lived a life from the angle of, he was a deeply religious person, which I'm not. I'm a spiritually aware person, but I'm not religious. But he loved nature, and I would imagine in his own way he saw the sacredness of Mother Earth, but he wouldn't have called it that.
So that was probably an influence, perhaps. Although you were, I really understand that the soul has its own kind of path and own nature. That must have been an influence as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how important it was until much later. I mean, I moved off to London and went to college and worked and travelled and did all sorts of things. It was only only really coming to Malvern when my daughter was a baby and she's now 45. So I first came and lived on the hills then. and had a big garden and just fell in love with the beauty of Malvern and the hills.
Yeah, there's a special energy here, isn't there? Yeah,
definitely.
So, reading your book, I agree with the other lady that reviewed it and said it was unputdownable. It definitely was, and I resonated with a lot of what you said in that. You know, I read how you were kind of feeling at odds with the world around you, and you were on this kind of path from an early age of trying to break free from a lot of the constraints and the boxes that, you know, this power over paradigm likes to put people in. And you had quite a colourful life, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
But I always say my life sort of started off really when I discovered working in a psychiatric hospital. When I was trained as an occupational therapist, and I was qualified to work in both. And as part of my training, I was sent off to psychiatric hospitals and physical hospitals to do 3 months at a time. And I suddenly knew this was my life's work. And for years I've said to people, you know, if I didn't work in a psychiatric hospital, I'd be a patient in one, because I think the whole world is mad. And so I could completely understand where my stressed out, traumatized clients were coming from, even though I was young and I hadn't had trauma of my own. But it's like, it's not, the ones who break down are not the mad ones. The ones who break down are the sensitive ones.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Yeah, we're in a society that it's very unnatural, more so back then, but still now with, you know, capitalism and the commercial world that we live in. We're very kind of still in a very separate kind of mentality if you look at the wider world. And that doesn't lend well to good mental health, does it? No. Especially those, like you say, that are sensitive. Yeah. And there's a lot of turbulence going on, and there has been, you know, all those decades ago too. I mean, after the war.
That's right.
I can imagine that it was, you know, very much a time of trying to recover and rebuild the economy.
Yes. And also the pressure in the 50s of, you know, the adverts you still see of the little woman with the permed hair and her sort of latest washing machine or something, and that was supposed to be what made her happy.
Yeah.
And it always struck me as very odd.
Yeah. Yeah, very one-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a theme in your book as well, isn't it? About that struggle with the very power over paradigm of, you know, women in the home. In your marriage, it's very much women is in the home. She just, you know, looks after the home and the children, and the man goes out to work.
Yes.
Very stifling for somebody with a brain,
yes,
with creative kind of potential, and that spirit that is evident in your book. Yeah, very much a free spirit, and
And it's made me aware of how lucky I was, because being young in the 60s, there was a culture of breaking free. Now, my husband was 10 years older than me, so although we lived just off Portobello Road and were very much part of the amazing 60s, he kind of, he grew a beard because I asked him to. I cut little slits in his trousers and put flowered material in so that he'd have bell bottoms, and grew his hair, and his mother was speechless when he first went home, rather than in his dark suit, which she'd dressed him up in until then. So it was only years later I realised that I was part of that time, and my brother lived up the road, and he later became an activist. And he actually was such an activist. He was the chief person starting up the Peace Squadron in Auckland in New Zealand, where he ended up living. And Greenpeace joined them, and then eventually, because of their activism, New Zealand became the one and only nuclear-free zone in the world, which I think in time to come will be a very important part for ecology, because obviously we don't know the long term of what all this stuff we're sinking in the ground. The nuclear waste, we have no idea what it's doing to the earth and what it's doing. And so the fact that there is one little island somewhere means quite a lot to me, and my brother had something to do with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was living up the road from us just before he'd gone off on his travels. And we were part of quite a dynamic sort of international bunch of people who were into everything. And it was only years later I realised my husband had just come along for the ride, really. It wasn't his milieu. But it was brilliant for me, because it gave me all the songs, like The Times They Are Changing, and Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and everything. I was aware that it felt as if people had never been young in this way before, and maybe they hadn't, because there wasn't the mobility of movement prior to that. You'd live and go to work in the same town you grew up in and marry the boy next door sort of thing and stay. And there was something amazing about being in London in the 60s.
I can imagine. I bet it was.
And I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of the first wave, really. Like you say, that, youth wasn't like that before. There was definitely a sense, and I definitely subscribe to the idea that we are, we're being born into an earth where we have this desire to make changes, and there are these waves of star seeds that come in, and the first sort of generation star seeds, like yourself, came in time for the 60s, and then that's it. That was the first wave, and we've got the next generation, and so on. Kind of, kicking back and, making changes, breaking down the old paradigm.
And I often wondered what would it have been like if I'd have just got together with somebody like my brother, who was very non-misogynist and non-controlling, and for a long while I couldn't understand it. And then I thought, no, because one of my big things has been this working as a therapist with liberating women and changing the way a person feels about themselves, empowering them to go, no, you can do it despite what society's saying. So I think I was destined to have a husband who was very from the opposite, from the power over. No, you stay at home, you have the children. And I needed that in order to liberate myself and be able to be so empowered to help change my life and hopefully the life of many women I've worked with over the years.
Yeah. Your experience helped you to understand from the first person, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And also, I think these trials and tribulations show us our own strength.
Yes.
We're not going to know our own strength until we actually put it to the test.
That is true. And I've gone on. I mean, I used to really quite blame men, and I don't blame men anymore. In fact, I often feel sorry for men because they're often so trapped in the system that they have to sort of go along with it because it's the only way to survive, and they know that they want to keep a home for their wife and children and things. So it's not a male-female argument anymore. To me, it's a paradigm argument. The paradigm of power over, and of course there's as many women who go along with power over as our last Prime Minister proved.
Yeah.
I'll get onto that.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
That's a whole other discussion, but
it isn't. You're right. It isn't just about gender.
No, it isn't.
Either sex can be, very power over paradigm.
Absolutely,
driven.
And sometimes worse because they've learned how to be extra power over because they're a woman.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the inner traits, the inner feminine, the yin energy, which is what Thriving Life is all about, the indigenous people. It's a matriarchal society. Apparently the money, the property, the names go from the mother. And it's to do with the land they're on. They love the land. And it's not, I mean, sometimes I've had arguments and say it's not just let the feminine side rule over the masculine. That's not what it's about at all, as you well know. When the feminine side does hold the power, it holds it equally and fairly.
Yes.
Because the mother has a boy child and a girl child. It's like we're not going to be mean to one lot because we've given birth to this little boy that's now a man and maybe not behaving too well.
I think feminism as a movement perhaps got twisted.
Yes.
I do believe that there was possibly some kind of interference in the movement to make it distorted. Yeah, to make it to be kind of for and against. A kind of a conflict between.
Because there was a lovely program I saw about the early days of Greenham Common and the women who started it, who were from the mining towns of South Wales, and they were just ordinary women who did not want these nuclear power, whatever they were, nuclear ships coming into England. Mm-hmm. And their men supported them. Their men drove them over to the camps and looked after the children, and their mother had the children, or, if they couldn't have the children at the camps. And it was a gentle, earth-based love that was where feminism came in. And then in the 70s, 80s, where it just turned into women dressing like men and wearing these clothes with these great shoulder pads and thinking if they strut around and behaved like men, that was feminism, and it missed the point entirely. Yeah.
So I just wanted to touch on that, actually. You mentioned about the indigenous cultures and how they were very much in tune with the earth. I was thinking about something I read or learnt a little while ago, and it was very interesting that shamans in indigenous cultures would be identified because they would be going through some kind of illness or difficulty, and it's because of that they would then be initiated into being a shaman. And it was kind of interesting. You mentioned about people with mental health issues in society that were very sensitive, and in your own life, you felt at odds. And I wonder if we've been born into indigenous cultures, you and the people that you've been helping might have been singled out as being the shamans and the medicine men and women.
Quite, absolutely. Yes. And I mean, that's known that why people have breakdowns is, well, who was it, Young or somebody said they break down for two reasons. One is that they are simply inadequate and can't cope with life, or the other is they're super adequate and can't cope with being treated as if they're not. There's a mismatch.
Yeah.
And as soon as I read that, I recognised that was myself. Yes, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that in my own life. I went through early years going through religion, like you went through the Christadelphians. Yeah. My parents were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh gosh, similar.
Very similar, isn't it?
Very similar.
And they were very, fundamentalist, as you probably know. And I'd be cooped up in a room, in a hall, listening to somebody blabbering on and telling how you can't even think about sex, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and we're sinners.
And when you're a child, you're not a sinner. No. You're a happy, jolly little person who's in touch with everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, to be told you're a sinner is like, but what have I done?
Yeah.
What have I done?
I've got a good heart,
Yes. I'm kind.
Yes.
And I have memories of listening to talks of terrible things going on in other countries and getting all my pocket money out of the bank and going along and giving it into the donation for these people who are having a hard time.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not the behaviour of a sinner when you're about 8 years old.
No.
And none of us are like that, naturally.
No. I think a lot of religions have a core of truth in them. But again, like any kind of system, it gets influenced by the wider system, doesn't it? Yes. And there again, we had the power over paradigm, evident in there. It would be men up on the stage as well, and it would be very kind of dictatorial and hierarchical.
Yes, yes. And that was how they thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and again in the school system. Yeah. I could identify with what you're saying there, and the whole kind of breaking free and finding oneself, and then finding your path.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody ever taught talked about breaking free and finding your path until the 60s. And then it was so dominated afterwards. I mean, my children were raised in the 80s, where it was Reagan and Thatcher going on about there's no such thing as society and everybody for themselves and dog eat dog. And that whole culture that grew up after the 60s just said, oh, they were a load of nutty hippies. But we weren't. And now what's going on is, I mean, all the things that are going wrong with the climate and with society and everything, we all predicted. There were books being written back in the early 70s about what's going to happen if we carry on as we are now. And it's all come about.
Moving on to Indigenous cultures then, and their very different approach to living on planet Earth. There's been some predictions from some Indigenous cultures about how Earth was going to, end up being with, humankind as they are, living on the planet and dealing with, life as they do now. But you studied with Pat McCabe, who is part of an Indigenous culture. Is that right?
Yes, she's a Dine elder, which used to be called Navajo.
Yeah.
And I when I say I studied, I just read everything I could find from her, and then I started communicating with her, and then I sent her the introduction to the book and asked if that was okay.
Yeah. And
got her permission. She wanted some words changing, which I did. And but it was the emotional connection that made it so powerful for me. I mean, I've read, I've studied, I've been around for a long time. I've never heard somebody speak and couldn't stop crying. And since then, I've been in one-on-ones with her, and it's the same thing. She'll say something, and I'm off. And I can only say, I think it means she is speaking to my soul. She's speaking a language which my soul goes, oh, the Lord for that. There's some sanity here. It's quite odd for someone like me. I mean, I'm emotional in my, when I'm sort of my own, feel like, watching a sad film or something, but I've never had that experience before. I mean, there's an explanation that I think, I don't know about you, but I believe in past lives. I believe we've been here before.
I do.
And when I lived in America for a while, I had an experience of a past life in a very tragic situation where we were white. I was part of a I don't know what particular what's the word?
Tribe?
A tribe.
Yeah.
The particular tribe. I don't know what tribe I was. I've never found out. But we were in the way of the railway coming. And we were told to move, and our chief wouldn't allow us to move. And the tribe got wiped out.
Wow.
But I personally didn't, because I knew it was coming. And I told the chief, who wouldn't listen to me. And I'd gone off in a huff. I'd ridden my horse and gone off over the hillside and just gone for a few days. And when I came back, I could smell it before I came over the hill. And the whole of our encampment was under fire.
Oh, that's tragic.
I was a young woman, and a very angry young woman.
Yeah.
Which may well account for some of what I'm coming with.
Yeah, on the warpath.
Yes. And unfortunately, I ended up killing myself and poisoning myself because I was so angry, I couldn't come to terms with it at all. And apparently, and I've done a lot of inner work with it and worked with spirit guides, and what I should have done was gone stomping off to the next tribe in several sort of miles away and been taken in, and they'd have looked after me, and there was probably somebody I could have had a life with.
Yeah.
But I was so angry. So angry.
Well, it's given you the fuel to, be the spiritual warrior in this life, hasn't it?
Yes. And it's quite funny, really, because in this life, my ex-husband, his hobby was railways and preserving old railways. And, oh yes, there was something going on there.
Do you think there was a past life with you two then, maybe?
Well, except that he was the owner of the railway. And so yes,
perhaps.
it was a past life.
Yes.
But it wasn't a personal one. But it was enough for me to have a reason for going out and do that again.
Wow. Interesting. Wow. So, yeah, this is something that your soul is kind of driven by, I guess, a part of it.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
And Pat McCabe herself, I understand that they're raising money to buy a mountain?
Yes.
That belonged to them originally?
Yes. And quite a wonderful thing happened quite recently. I work with Deep Adaptation, an international body of people working to prepare people for when societal collapse happens, which does appear it is not that far off, which of course goes along with the collapse of the climate and the collapse of so much else, the economics and everything. And I became part of a small group, a side group in Deep Adaptation, where we all absolutely love Pat McCabe, and we started to call it Pat McCabe Group. and we'd tell each other of the latest recordings we'd found, and we were all studying it. And then we said, no, we have to call it The Thriving Life, because it's just too sort of, hero worshipping, and that wasn't what it was, but we all had this same energy field around her. Anyway, I don't know some of these people hardly at all, and so a friend of mine said, oh, let's get hold of this, let's get the people from this group to invite Pat to come on and do a Zoom with us, because our people are skilled website designers, skilled finance, there's all sorts of people in the group.
Yeah.
So there was about 6 of us, including Pat. And not long after the call was going, one of the guys that we've always thought was sort of secretly in love with Pat, he sort of goes all blushy and silly, even though he's a much older man, when she's mentioned. Anyway, he said to her, so you're going to be needing some startup money? And she said, well, yes, we've sort of started. And he said, okay, well, there's $10,000 winging their way to you to start up, and then we'll talk about what you need after that.
Wow.
And the rest of us went, what? With no idea. And later I heard that, this guy has his reasons for wanting to help, probably background reasons.
Wow.
But the perfection of it, I mean, imagine that me hearing, about this woman, and then telling them about her and this group coming together, and they are buying the mountain. I've seen pictures of it.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So
that was recent then?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's all happening now. And they've started to build a school for the Dine people. Yeah, yeah. So that's just so exciting.
Really is.
Yes.
And it's really heartening that, change can happen. That's,
yes.
More confirmation, isn't it?
Yes.
It's great hearing these stories.
And there are Western people with lots of money who want to help.
Yes.
And when the Indigenous people speak out, people want to help.
Yeah.
It's just everything flowing together. It's this thing I write about, not in this book, but I've written 2 other books, and I talk about the benevolent universe.
Yes.
There is a benevolent universe, and these synchronicities. I mean, that was the most phenomenal thing, that I happened to know a guy who was going to give her that money straight off and then proceed to give more.
Couldn't make it up, could you?
No, you couldn't make it up.
It does feel, and it does confirm that there is kind of like an orchestration going on. And you talk about your guardian angel, and it just reminds me of that guidance going on behind the scenes. Yes,
somebody who'd read the book recently said to me, oh, was I Buddhist or something? Because I talk about the God. She wasn't sure where I got the concept from. And I said, to be honest, there are a whole lot of beings in touch with me, but I thought that was too freaky for a book like that. So I just put them all together and called them the Guardian Angel.
Ah. I'd like to hear more about these beings that that's helped you? That's something you'd like to talk about? Or was that too personal?
No, it was when I was living in America when life was absolutely crazy. I discovered that I could ask a question. I'd always been a meditator since I was 19.
Yeah.
And I discovered I could ask a question and then go very quiet. And I've also been journaling. I always journaled from, I think it was Ira Progoff who started the whole thing about journaling way, way back.
Okay.
And so I've always written down my thoughts and worked out my thoughts and my feelings through writing. And I discovered in America when life was so difficult that I could ask a question, write a question, go into meditation, and something would speak to me. And the first being that spoke to me was called Limitless Love and Truth, who I later discovered channeled through someone called David Spangler, who used to be connected with Findhorn, and then went back to Canada, which I think where he came from. So I believe these beings, they don't just channel through one person. And so that was the first source, and then I've had all sorts of different sources. And now my main source are called the Grandmothers, Great Council of Grandmothers.
I remember that in the book, yeah.
Yes. And they are a bunch of 13 indigenous, well, I don't know if they're all indigenous, but they're different nationalities of women who are all in the spirit world. And they came to an American woman and started to talk to her about 20 years ago. And she started started writing books about them. It's called The Net of Light. But we've had a grandmother's group here in Malvern, friends of ours, for 10 years or more.
Okay.
And one or two of us who get our own personal channeling, we channel the grandmothers ourselves.
Do you have to be grandmas to join the group?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's a spiritual. It's a crone. The meaning of crone, wise woman, is they are usually women. Sorry, Dave.
Yes.
But but in the grandmother's books, she's now written 4 books, and the 4th one is the most interesting one because finally in the 4th book, the grandmothers are speaking through her about the earth being a living being.
Wow. Beautiful.
But I think that is because the problem with people who channel and write, you can only get channeling to the level of your own development. So this lady was quite a traditional psychotherapist when she first met these ladies on the beach one day.
Yeah.
And so they could only channel what she could handle. And it's taken all these years before she's taught. I mean, some of the quotes in this latest book of hers are just pure earth listening, pure my stuff.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting.
That's good that you mentioned that because I wanted to ask you about the Earth Listening Circle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, several years ago, just before lockdown, I was on holiday by the sea and my back had gone. And I was spending a lot of time in the bedroom, and we'd rented this house right on the coast. It was February, and the seas were amazing. And I spent so much time sitting there and meditating with the sea, and then it started to talk to me and was actually letting me become aware of how angry it was at the way it and the rest of the natural world was being treated.
How did you receive these messages, and how do you generally receive messages? Is it clairvoyantly or clairsentient, or is it a mixture of different clairs?
I've forgotten what the word is for knowing. Is that
clairnos?
It's because
yes,
I don't
it's a bit of a tongue
hear
tie,
a sentence, and I don't see. I just know.
Claircognizance.
That's it.
That's the word. Yeah, I have to get my tongue around the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just know, and then I can reply, and I get the next bit. That's how that comes. But all the years prior to that was with writing, and it's like automatic writing. So much so that you're writing by hand on a journal, and your hand gets to the end, and it shoots across like an old-fashioned typewriter. You know how they used to go doink,
yes,
and go back, and your hand does that.
Yeah,
and you've no idea what you're going to write. I would start a sentence by sort of repeating my question.
Okay.
And when you ask about so and so and so and so, then and the next word comes, you don't know what it's going to be, and then you've got this whole, and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. And when it comes, it's always so beyond what my mind could ever have thought up. You know, that's how come you know it's come from somewhere beyond yourself, because I'm not that clever. You know, I might have done lots of courses and things, but if I'd have had that answer, I'd have done it before, you know.
Yes.
So that's how it comes. And I think many people can do this. You know, it's not some clever gift that I've got. You know, I was just always stressed out and needed some help. Yeah,
I believe that too. We do have that innate gift. It's just giving the time and the focus to do that, isn't it?
And then trusting what comes.
Well, that's really good for the people listening, because I'm sure there are people out there that would like to explore that more or get more in tune.
Yes.
And so your Earth Listening Circle is about that, isn't it? But listening to Earth and nature.
Well, what happened was I came back from that holiday, and that was when I was giving a talk, that's right, to Extinction Rebellion about Deep Adaptation. And I knew very little about Deep Adaptation, except that it had 4 R's, which were restoration, resilience, reconciliation, relinquishment. And anyway, so I prepared this PowerPoint talk and gave it to Excel. But it was the first talk we had to do on Zoom, because it was a pandemic just started. So having given that talk, I thought I need to know more. So I joined Deep Adaptation and went on a workshop. And again, it was the very beginning of the pandemic. And we were put into breakout rooms to talk about how we were being affected by it. Well, myself and these 2 other people, a young Frenchman and an American woman just a bit younger than me. And we were all going, we love it. It's absolutely brilliant. There's no noisy planes and everything's stopping. It's the best thing. Nature's going to love it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we were talking like this in the breakout room. And then we went back into the main group and everybody else was going, oh, isn't this terrible? And then more we talked, they said, oh, we wished we'd been in your breakout. It was so optimistic. And we all just thought it was hilarious. And so we agreed to meet on a Zoom later.
Okay.
Oh, and during that breakout room, I'd said, when I was on holiday, the sea had spoken to me and told me how angry it was at the way the world's treating the natural world. And instead of them thinking I was pretty nuts, which is what my partner did at the time, they said, oh yeah, well, the regularly talks to us, the trees, so we just started getting together, and some other people joined us, and for 6 months we met every week just to meditate on listening to the earth. What's the earth been telling you this week? And then the other 2, I hadn't realized, but they were high up sort of manager people doing big things in Deep Adaptation, were terribly busy. I'm retired. So I said, I'll take this public. So we set up a Deep Adaptation group on a Friday at 5:30. It's still going strong. I did it last night. 10 people on it. Every week it happens. And, sometimes we're down to 6, sometimes we're up a bit more.
Yeah.
But people come when they can. Obviously, nobody can come every Friday. And it's international. There's people all around. And then they've set up one in Australia. We've got a new Aussie Earth Listening. Somebody's...
Wow.
Because you don't have to be skilled to do it. You just have to resonate with what we're talking about, and the sense that we need to be listening to the earth. And Germany, they started one up in Germany, German-speaking one.
Oh, excellent. Wow, springing from
your
original
from our
group.
one. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we joined the Earth Listening Circle last week.
Oh, you did,
didn't we? And it was really good. We really enjoyed it.
You'd come.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you'd incorporated listening to the cosmos, didn't you? Kind of that connection.
I did.
And belonging, the theme belonging to Earth and the wider cosmos.
Every week I write a little paragraph about whatever comes to me, usually on a Sunday morning. And that one happened to be on belonging. And it was through talking to you that it's not just the Earth we're listening to. The Earth is also listening to the universe, because she knows she's a part of the whole.
Yes.
And I love that, because that's the first time I brought that concept of the wider universe in. That was from talking to you too. It just inspired me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It was very powerful. and very heart-centering session, actually.
Yes, people say that, and people, some people come who are very ill, and so I've had people join it from a hospital.
Wow.
And the young lady who's always in and out of hospital, and she joins, and older people and people with all sorts of problems, and they do say they always feel better at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's just sharing, just the sense of us meditating together and connecting with the earth and listening, and then sharing what we've got. And, we might not have got anything. Somebody might say, oh, well, I just had a walk, but, oh, there was such a beautiful bird I saw that I'd never noticed before. And, of course, that is earth listening. They've noticed something. Yeah. They're listening. Well, listening can be sight, can't it?
Yeah.
Not just hearing. The earth doesn't suddenly say, hello, Emma Mary, how are you? It's not how it works.
Talks in many ways.
Talks in many ways.
Just like the universe talks in many ways.
Yes. Yeah.
And that connection to nature, I think, is healing in itself, that sense of wider connection. And I would say it's very much at the core of a lot of illnesses, actually.
Absolutely.
That sense of separation and disconnection.
Absolutely. I'd say all illnesses. Because we are a life force in our body.
Yeah.
And when that body gets disconnected from that life force, then it's going to tell us in no uncertain ways. I've been aware of that for such a long time. Oh, talking of channeling, the other thing I channel is my body. I can, and anybody can do this, put a pen in your non-dominant hand, and first of all, write with your dominant hand, hello body, I want to know what the symptoms of so-and-so are here to tell me. Put the pen in your non-dominant hand, and with a very weird and slow and crazy writing, you will get your body telling you exactly what's wrong with you and why, what you need to do.
Yeah, well, that's a very good tip.
Yes?
Yeah.
I've done that for
Give
years.
that a go.
Yeah, it's great fun. You have to be very patient. And then what you have to do as soon as you've finished, if the writing's as bad as mine, you have to go over with your dominant hand, writing it legibly.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll have no idea what you do.
It's like being at school, isn't it? The teacher writing what you
yes,
said
so
underneath.
On top of it. Yeah, but honestly, it happens. And I don't know where I learned that, but I've done it for years.
Yeah, the body has an amazing intelligence, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I use a kind of kinesthetic test. You can use the ring of power. You can sort of do that with your your thumb and your index finger, can't you?
Oh, yeah.
Like that, and you can ask a question.
Oh, I do it this way.
Ah, okay.
You're calling it a ring of... it's a very similar thing. I dowse like this. I got very tired of having to have something in my pocket to wiggle, and I learned that this is a yes and this is a no. When it sticks, it's a no. And then when it wiggles, it's a yes.
Okay. So it's all about resistance, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And you can stand with your... You can stand, can't you? And you can ask a question, your body will sort of go forward if it's a yes, or it will
I
go back
didn't
if it's
know
a no.
that one. That's interesting.
Different ways of communicating.
I mainly use it in like a bookshop. I know there's a book here I've come in to get, and I've no idea. Is it on that wall? No. This wall, yes. Is it above that height? No. And in the end, you get to the book.
So if it sticks, that's a
no.
That's a no.
And when it flows, it's a yes.
Ah, interesting. Yes. So, going to the next thing I was going to mention is Malvern Green Space.
Yes.
Yeah. Where we met. Talking about sustainability and listening to the earth and connecting and communicating, being in a community. Malvern Green Space kind of does the action that follows on from that, don't they? They're very much sort of boots on the ground.
It was born out of Extinction Rebellion, and it was at a visioning meeting. And have I told you this? I can't remember if I told you this. That I was again in a breakout room. This is what I love about Zoom, because the breakout rooms are obviously they're meant to be. You end up with somebody who you're meant to be in that room with.
Yeah.
And there was a visioning Extinction Rebellion local meeting, and I was put with Nadia and maybe somebody else, I can't remember. And she had this vision. She'd already been studying the climate emergency centres, which is what Malvern Green Space is. It's a climate emergency centre.
What is a climate emergency centre?
Well, it's what Green Space is. Some people have set up an idea, and they will put on teaching lessons to teach you how to do it in your own town. So they're all over the country. They're popping up. And Nadia had already been studying this and had been on several talks saying what was needed. And so Nadia told me all about these ideas. That's right. So there's community meals. There's fridge spaces, for people to help themselves to food. Mm-hmm. There's collecting food from supermarkets that is fine, but they can't sell because of date. And they do things like clothes swaps, and we're doing this fashion show. Yeah. And that's all about non-fashion show, i.e. go to a second-hand shop and buy an outfit for less than £10 and prove how nice you can look.
Yeah, me and my daughter are involved in that, actually.
Are you?
Yes.
And me, I'm an old lady model.
Yes, I saw you volunteer. Yeah, great.
And then we've done all the food, the seed, produce, and plant swaps, which have stopped now for the year, but we did them all through the summer. And all that. And the object is to raise enough money to get a property, and then which has got some ground, and then we grow stuff, and it's communal for the community. Yeah. And I believe it's the way that we need in each town to do this, because all the stuff provided by society is actually probably going to collapse, I believe.
Yeah. Quite a few sources are saying that now. It seems to be coming up quite soon.
Yes.
So it's a wonderful community. The people there are very authentic, genuine, kind people that with vision, with guts, determination.
It's a very exciting prospect. I'm really happy. I'm one of the trustees. I'm very happy to be involved with it.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be a volunteer there and to go along to the mills and see them flourish and thriving.
Yes.
This new paradigm.
Yes.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Emma Mary. I know we could go on, and there's lots of other tangents we could go on. Maybe another time we can invite you on again. But for now, thank you so much, and carry on doing the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really enjoyable.